So this is the video where I answer all the questions people ask me on my Halloween special. There's a lot to cover, and I think you know how this works, so let's get right to business, shall we? My first question comes from TB Tabby, who asks, if you had a hammer, would you hammer in the morning? Well, in fact, I do have a hammer, but I only hammer in the evening all over this land. Second, we have Logic, who said, that's a good look for you. Well, obviously that's not a question, but it's from Logic, so hey, cool. Then from Zebonga, hello, why do you hide your face? Your next video implies your family and friends know, so that makes me curious as to why. That's a good question, and it's one I get a lot. I actually don't mind people seeing my face, and in fact I've shown myself removing my static face for fun at the end of a few of my videos. The big reason I cover my face is that I like to record my voice ahead of time, allowing me to follow a tight script and get my vocals right, then mime my actions afterward, like a few other YouTubers do, including Logic, whom several people have compared me to. I toyed with a few ideas, starting with a hood that mostly obscured my face, but after tinkering with a few things, I decided to cover my face in a hat, then key out the orange to create the static effect. See? Effects off, effects on. Off, on. Off. Looks pretty weird, huh? In fact, my wife is so creeped out by this, she refuses to help me film when I'm in this mask. Effects back on. But addressing my family and my identity, I am happier not having my family and community know about my channel at this point. Knowing I'm an atheist is one thing, but processing the irreverence I sometimes display on this channel might be difficult for them. Also, the pastor I skewer in some of my videos has a pretty big and well-known church in our community, and my kids have friends who attend it, so I'd prefer not to be known for being so adversarial with him. That said, I wouldn't be devastated if my channel became public knowledge. My kids know about it, so I'm under no illusion that it's a tightly guarded secret. I'm just in no big hurry to get it out there. The Zero Neonics asks, how immersed in the Christian delusion were you when you were younger? How did your journey to atheism begin? Well, that's a good and very long question, so I'll try to make it tolerably short. I grew up in a Pentecostal Christian home, and I attended a Pentecostal church and school from kindergarten until high school. Basically, everything I learned until I went to college was from a Christian perspective. As a child, it never even occurred to me to question God or the inerrancy of the Bible, and for several years into adulthood, I led Bible studies, taught adult and children's Sunday school classes, and was briefly a Christian school principal. So I guess the answer is pretty darn immersed. As for how my journey to atheism began, I had serious doubts for at least 15 years, and from time to time got close to being a full-on closeted atheist. But it was only 4 years ago that I first identified as one and started selectively coming out to people. There was no single event that set off my journey toward atheism. The internal absurdities and contradictions of the religion, along with the obvious absence of God, just nagged at me until I couldn't honestly keep calling myself Christian. Then we have a whole series of questions from Guitar Dog, including, if William Lane Craig was on fire, would you put him out? Now, if he were literally on fire, then yes, I would put him out. But I have to admit that if he caught the Pentecostal fire, I'd probably get out my camera and start recording. Then he asks, seriously though, would you debate WLC? No, I actually wouldn't debate him, because while I find him easy enough to expose after repeated viewings of his material, I think he would steamroll me in a live debate. As totally vapid as his arguments are, he is good at some things, and live presentation is one of them. And honestly, I'm okay with this concession. I see debate as a relic of pre-internet society, and video responses are a much better way to deliberately flesh out good ideas without letting a fast-talking showman take advantage of a live audience. Next, do you ever speak with your old pastor? I don't, for a variety of reasons. I honestly can't think of what I would say to him given the chance. Everything he says is so measured and political that conversation was stilted even when we agreed on religion, and I usually had the slimy feeling that he was glad-handing or trying to sell me on something. A lot of people, even those attending that church, feel the same way. If my videos ever did become public knowledge, he would probably ignore them, or if he couldn't get away with that, would make a passing reference to how mean and irreverent and profane I was, and hope his congregation would ignore it. And if I were to try speaking to him in person, I could only envision him stonewalling with safe, pat answers. I'm honestly more concerned with addressing his congregation than him, and I've thought of putting a gentler version of my response to him on my personal Facebook page. And finally, what sports do you like up there in Alaska? You do live in Alaska, yes? Yes, I do live in Alaska. I absolutely loved basketball when I was younger and did nothing but play before school, at lunch, and after school. And in fact, I used to be about a 75% three-point shooter. I also used to do dog sledding and hiking. I've since lost interest in most sports, though, mostly because I'm too busy. Except f***ing. My wife and I really like f***ing. And from Child Boo, since you became an atheist, are there ever moments when you ask God to reveal himself to you if he did happen to exist? It's really strange because I truly, 100% unequivocally reject the claims of God or gods, especially Yahweh as I'm most familiar with him. Yet I'll find myself doing this. It's not often, and it surprises me when it does happen. Maybe it's just the power of indoctrination? This is an interesting question, and I'm always fascinated to hear the atheists experience such things. I don't think I've ever prayed to God to reveal himself, even as a Christian. Instead, I remember trying really hard to conjure the feeling of his presence through prayer. I think the reason for this was I'd been trained to think my lack of connection to God was my personal failing and revealed that I didn't pray or do devotions enough. I had an especially hard time speaking in tongues, probably because it's bullshit, and that led to a lot of struggles and shame. The whole thing really is messed up, but I think my drift into atheism was so gradual and long in coming that I was pretty far gone by the time I identified as a non-believer. God just isn't a thing to me, and I don't have any of those lingering Christian habits. Then Diesel1968 asks, do your family members know you're an atheist? And how did you feel when you first realized you were an atheist? I felt like a burden was lifted off my shoulders. Well, my family members do know. They were all pretty nice about it, and I don't think they were surprised by the time I told them. Honestly, the hardest part was telling my sons. I think it was weird for them at first, but they're pretty cool with the idea now. My wife and stepdaughter only ever knew me as an unbeliever, so there's never been an issue there. It's hard to tell how I felt when I first realized I was an atheist, because I don't even know exactly when I realized it. It was something I slowly admitted to myself, and in the process I sometimes found myself straining to delude myself, and other times trying to hide my lack of belief from others, before finally feeling the freedom of being able to think freely about whatever I wanted to. The last part definitely did feel like a burden being lifted off my shoulders. Giving up the need to police my mind against innocent and factual thoughts was one of the best feelings in my life. And Johnny Drive-By, who has a music/atheism-based channel and interacts with a lot of other YouTubers, so go check him out, asked a question that I presume is a riddle. You walk up a mountain that has two paths. One leads to the other side of the mountain, and the other will get you lost forever. Two twins know the path that leads to the other side. You can ask them only one question, except one lies and one tells the truth, and you don't know which is which. So what do you ask? I would ask each one which way the other would tell me to go. Then I'd go in the opposite direction. And then Asylum asks, are you and Logic the same person? I've been asked this a surprising number of times. And yes, we are. Then Kenneth Adam Eveson, who I just realized has an awesome name, asked two interesting questions. First, who would you like to do a collaboration with? That's a tough one. If we're talking about absolute pie-in-the-sky dream choices, Logic would be fun, of course, but our style is pretty similar, and honestly, he's way better at it than I am. I'd get a kick out of doing a chick track with the Bible Reloaded, just to find out whether I'd succeed in a dad-jokey kind of way or just fall flat. Paulogia is another favorite I could see liking to work with, and it would be super cool to see how he drew me or animated me talking. The list is really endless, though. Non-Stamp Collector, Dark Matter 2525, Richard Dawkins, Hemant Mehta, Matt Dillahunty. Hey, if you're dreaming, why not? I guess there are too many choices to even think of, and I love just getting out there and trying to work with different people. And second, once the Ark encounter fails, what should it be used for? I'd say that if Canham gets convicted of fraud when the Ark fails, I would suggest that he be sentenced to live in the Ark and care for two of every kind of animal. If he can succeed in keeping them alive for the duration of the flood, he'll be set free. But if a single animal dies, then he goes to prison for the rest of his life. Except I guess that would be mean to the animals. Then Godless Geezer, who has a great channel and is an absolutely awesome guy to collaborate with, had two questions as well. First, when selling one's soul to the devil, what is a fair asking price? If I ever sold my soul, it would have to be for something really awesome. So the only worthwhile demand I could think of would be that God goes to hell too. And his second, much less hypothetical question is, also, how many students did the school with which you were employed have? The school I worked at was pretty small, with just around 100 students. In some ways that made it easier to run, but in other ways it introduced a lot of complications, and I ended up wearing an insane number of hats because we couldn't hire enough staff. It was pretty f***ing wild. I lasted 2 years at that school, which I've heard is the average for Christian school administrators. The hours, pressure, required skill set, and low pay make it almost impossible to keep anybody in those jobs. And Deconverted Man, a great guy who was one of the first people I met on YouTube and the first to give me a subburst through shoutouts, had some Halloween-themed questions. What's the most scary thing that you've had happen to you? Was there anything that you thought was supernatural happen to you? The scariest thing in terms of creepiness was sleep paralysis. If you've ever had it, you know what I'm talking about. When it's recurring, it's absolutely f***ing awful. I used to think it was caused by demons, so that was something I thought was a supernatural event, I guess. Also, I get scared of the dark after seeing weird things like the dead people in The Sixth Sense. As for actual physical events that scared me, once a moose was chasing me and I thought it was about to run over the person behind me, so I turned around and yelled at it. It scrambled to a stop about 5 to 10 feet away from me and turned around. Also, the door to my house once swung open while I was in the living room with my young children. I ran to see who it was, and it was a black bear, which fortunately wandered off to play in the front yard. Finally, he asked what my favorite candy is. I guess if I had to pick, I'd say cotton candy. Or maybe the Ritter Sport Milk Chocolate Butter Biscuit. But those things are just way too absurdly expensive. Then David Lass asked, if you had the power to choose one skill to bequeath to all of humanity in an instant, what skill would you choose and what reasoning would you provide to support that choice? I would give all humanity the skill of introspection, because in my experience, people who understand themselves and why they do things also empathize better with others and behave better toward them. Chaosism, another great YouTuber, asked where I got my background from my Halloween video, which was obviously a still version of Logic's background. Then he asked, as a more serious question, would you ever pursue having a live public discussion, debate, interview with a theist? Despite my answer about Craig and debates, I would probably participate in a live discussion with a theist through a hangout or something. Depending on the format and the disposition of the person, it could be really interesting. And finally, LaRue the Day asked, I'd love to hear about your pets. What are they and what are their names? I have 2 pets. One is my dog named Lila. She never barks and she just kind of follows me around all the time and goes on hikes with me. This is her on a mountain. And this is her with a moose that adopted her once. I also have a cat named Sven. He knocks over my microphone and bumps my camera, but he's really nice, mainly because he acts like a dog and not a cat. I think that covers everything from the comments. If I missed anybody, or if people have further questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. And thanks for all the fun questions. I really appreciated interacting with all my subscribers like this, and if anybody wants to do this again, even maybe in a live format, just let me know.